Welcome, everyone, to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday, June 29th, 2026. We've got a great show for you. Rebecca Biblioteca is here with me. How are you doing today?
I am fantastic. Just before we went on right now, I opened some of my messages, and somebody had said to me, I can tell from your podcasting that you need to go see a therapist right away. You have some kind of severe mental issues. So I'm excited to see what kind of crazy things we're going to say tonight. I can't wait.
Mormonism provides the crazy. We're just reporting on it.
That's what I say.
Yeah, there'll be some of that tonight. If you guys notice, obviously, Radio Free Mormon not with us. He is on a little trip out of town. He may end up calling into the show at some point to share with us a little church history where he's at. So we'll see if that happens. But we've got a great show lined up for you. This is the thumbnail. Sorry if you're a little grossed out. But again, this is the story, unfortunately. No jail or sex registry for LDS child abuser. Besides that story, and I'll be covering that. But besides that story, the true order of baptism. That will be Rebecca, another diabolical Mormon dentist. I'll be covering that. I've also got a story on a new portrait of Joseph Smith. Then Rebecca's got a story on the Mongolian Mission President with visa problems. And then I'll discuss a BYU gender gap study results. We'll finish off with some smaller stories. Get to know your bishop, or better yet, don't. Well, that's up to you, folks. Elder Oaks delivers a new missionary guidelines. The LDS temple goes random. We'll see what happens there. New Nauvoo Visitor Center and Christian rock music no longer of the devil. So with that, I wanted to just say, here is our weekly Mormon child sex abuse segment. I told you at the beginning of the year, this would happen week in and week out. And here we are, just about, I think, every week but one, we have covered an abuse segment by somebody inside the LDS church. This one comes from Chubbuck, Idaho, a former first counselor in the bishopric of an LDS ward in Chubbuck, Idaho. Do you know where Chubbuck's at, Rebecca?
I am not exactly sure. I spent the weekend in Twin Falls area, and it was cold and rainy. I don't know if it's in that area or not, but.
Okay, well, if somebody else out there knows, I'm sure we've got some listeners who live in Chubbuck, Idaho, but he was in the bishopric of an LDS ward there of the LDS church and has accepted a plea deal. This happened back in 24, but he got convicted. And I'll just read the rest of the story here, but it has to do with the prosecutor and the defense coming up with an agreement that lets this guy get away from any real punishment. Sort of a crazy story, but he accepts a plea deal that could allow him to avoid prison time and avoid the sex offender registry in a case that involved 5 teenage boys. 47-year-old Virgin Dean Larson was originally charged with 6 felonies. How does anyone miss prison time with 6 felonies? 6 felonies of child abuse, sexual child abuse, with a child under the age of 16. Under the March agreement with Bannock County prosecutors, these charges were dismissed in exchange for 6 felony counts of injury to a child, still felonies. Prosecutors and Larson's attorney will jointly recommend probation instead of prison, with the state capped at recommending no more than 30 years of probation. I'll just note a couple other things. This deal does not require sex offender registration. That to me is crazy too. The charges stem from allegations that Larson, while serving as and this is what they called him, a young men's program leader, touched the boys inappropriately during massages and cupping therapy sessions at his Chubbuck home between January 2023 and June 2024. The boys were between 12 and 15 years old at the time. Sounds like he was serving somewhere within the bishopric or young men's when this happened, huh, Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm sure he was some kind of young men's leader, although not officially, because, the whole program's done away with. And then you have the bishop as the young men's president, and then he can just kind of ad hoc assign people. And we've seen other alleged perpetrators in those callings with the young men.
Yeah, somebody's asking, what is cupping? And I'll just note, it is a form of therapy where they put a suction cup on various parts of the body to draw blood out, not to draw blood out of the body, but to draw blood close to the surface. And that suction on the body actually creates, they believe, better health. You'll notice if anybody ever out there watches UFC fights or watches a UFC event or other sporting events, you'll often see, if you can see the athlete's skin, you'll often see these red circles all over their body, and that's from them doing cupping therapy. So these boys were between 12 and 15 years old at the time. Some sessions occurred while the boys were nude, and others when they were covered only by a towel. The investigation began in July 2024 after the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare received a report from the Curtin McConkie law firm. Wonder who made that phone call, which of course represents the LDS Church. Chubbuck police eventually interviewed 7 juveniles. 5 disclosed the abuse. Larson has been free on $25,000 bond since his September 24 arrest. A change of plea hearing is scheduled for July 6th, so just around the corner. The presiding judge is not bound by the plea recommendations. This is true pretty much for any case. The judge isn't bound, so he could impose up to 40 years in prison or reject the agreement entirely, but the prosecution and the defense have come to an agreement that lets him avoid prison time and stay off of the sex offender registration. Rebecca, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I think everybody is upset about that. How does somebody like this not end up on the register so that other people can be warned? Again, it's like the annotation, right? It seems like everybody is trying everything they can not to give information to parents and people who need it to protect children. But I do wonder about this judge. There is quite a public outcry about this, that he would not have jail time and that he would not be on the registry. I wonder if the judge can be influenced by that. I guess we'll have to ask RFM, or maybe he'll do his own segment on this whole story. But I would think with such public outcry, the judge might say, maybe we better look at this again, because, and I read about this scenario, and he, of course, says that, it was therapeutic. The parents knew the boys were coming over. He was doing therapeutic massage and cupping on them. And, everyone should have been aware that happens unclothed. The families and the boys have a different story. So I don't know if that explanation maybe swayed, some of that outcome, saying, yeah, it wasn't really what they're saying it was. But we'll see. We'll wait for the judge. But I will say there is a lot of public outcry saying, why would this person not be on the sex offender register?
Yeah, I think when 5 boys speak about something being felony abuse, you ought to believe probably the 5 boys over the 1 man. So you talk about a remission of sins in that case. That takes us to our next story, which has to do with baptism and confirmation.
It does. And this is actually a really fascinating thing that popped up. Are you familiar with the Articles of Faith still, Bill? Can you recite them if somebody were to say to you, no? He's like, no, I put those way out of my mind. I find that they do come back, but then part of them is like kind of missing, which is funny. I'm maybe exercising them from my brain. But of course, the 4th one says, we believe that the first principles and ordinances of the gospel are: first, faith in the Lord Jesus Christ; second, repentance; third, baptism by immersion for the remission of sins; and fourth, laying on the hands for the gift of the Holy Ghost. So everybody knows that, baptism and confirmation. And this is over here from the church handbook, just the topical essay where it does confirm. It says, a person is confirmed a member of the church after baptism by a priesthood holder. That's how it happened to me. Is that how it happened to you, Bill? You got baptized? And
that's the correct order that I went through, for sure.
Yeah. And so that's what I thought. And we're, of course, here talking about baptisms for the dead, where usually youth are going into the temple and they're doing mass baptisms and mass confirmations. And when I did that as a youth, you would be baptized. You would go, do a series of names. You would go back into the locker room. You would change. You'd have to come out with wet hair. Oh, how embarrassing for a teenage girl, right? And then you'd sit down and you'd be confirmed for a certain number of people. But that was the order. Is that an order that you've experienced going into the temple before?
Yeah, whenever we did baptisms for the dead, we would do the baptisms first. And if there were people in the other room getting laid on of hands so that you didn't have all the kids in one place, they were doing names from the previous session of whoever went through. And then our youth, when they got done doing the baptisms, went into the room and were doing names that had already been baptized for.
Right. So there has been a little wiggle room on that, but it's always whatever name you're doing when you're sitting in that confirmation chair, that person has been baptized and is now receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost as per the article of faith and a lot of everything on the church website. So middle of the night, I'm awake. I'm looking at Faithful social media and I come across this post that says now able to do proxy confirmations before proxy baptisms. I'm like, what is this all about? And it's a person who has now been made aware through people that he knows in his temple. The temple we attend part of the year was given authorization from Salt Lake to start doing proxy confirmations before the proxy baptism had been completed. Okay. So, of course, almost instantly the post was removed, which made me even more intrigued, right? When a post is removed, why would that be removed? And then some of the people that were able to comment on it were like, oh, you must be talking about the scenario that you just described, Bill, where somebody had maybe been baptized the day before and now they were cycling through with the confirmations. Because I mean, it is a huge process with all of these names, many of them being repeated, and the youth coming in to do baptisms for the dead. So some other people kind of weighed in and like I said in the last slide said, oh, this must be, they've already been baptized. It's a new name. Person says this is different. The ordinances are not being done in the order of baptism first, then confirmation for a deceased individual. They were previously not allowed to do any proxy confirmations unless the proxy baptism was already completed in our temple. But now, as about a month ago, they can do the confirmation first and then the baptism. This is for the same name. Is this surprising to you, Bill?
In a church where it is so important that you take the sacrament with the right hand, it seems to me that we couldn't do confirmations before we do the baptisms.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's what this made me think. And as we go on some of these statements, and we won't read all of them, but people on the thread are defending it, saying, well, time doesn't exist in the next life, so it's okay if one's out of order or the other. But I'm thinking about all the things that are so precise. That priest or teacher, whoever blesses the sacrament, can you believe I can't remember having to say that prayer perfectly over and over until tears are running down their face because they're so humiliated? Or how it used to be that you had to wait a year to get sealed. It is all time sensitive. It is all order. God's church is a church of order, but not apparently here. You can receive the gift of the Holy Ghost before you make the commitment to be baptized. And I was really surprised about that. So, they kind of go on talking about this. They're kind of listing, no, this is the order. And they're saying somebody even said that it looks like now in a temple that this person's aware of, you can do the endowment before the initiatory. So I know that all this is because of time. I know that it's because of lack of volunteers, right? People working in the temple. And you just have to get these kids through. You have to get things going. But I, for one, exactly what you said, Bill, find it in a church of order that is such a stickler. You know what I mean? I'm sure all of us can point to examples in our lives where the church said, nope, I'm sorry, this is how it's done. I mean, I have an example of a cousin and my son who was going to get baptized. They were in separate stakes. We said, can we do this together so all the family members can go to one baptism? Neither stake president would allow it. Cannot be allowed, must be baptized separately. So family members go to different baptisms. And yet here they are saying this, just go ahead and do whatever you want. Now, I did have a lot of people chime in after I posted this on social media, and they said, it's kind of been this way a little bit, under the radar since maybe before COVID in certain temples where they will let you change the order simply. I know it's a time constraint. I know it's volunteerism in the temple. They just can't do it. But again, house of order, I don't know. What do you think about overall what this means? Is it just an assembly line? Is it just like a factory, just pushing people through? And this idea that as long as it takes place on the same day, time is not the same in, the next life, just get it done. I don't know. It just seems like we're playing church and making it up as we go along. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, in a religious system where so many things have to be done the right way, it is a strange thing to watch this church, if this is true, begin to change in ways that it sort of nod, wink, wink. We really don't care about the specifics anymore.
Yep. And that's kind of what some of the posters said before the post was removed. But again, I just, to me, you make the commitment through baptism. You say, I accept, I'm a member of the church. I've made this commitment. now I get my gift, right? The gift of the Holy Ghost. So it's cats and dogs living together. I don't know. We'll see what else they change. But as I understand from a lot of people reaching out, this is happening more and more in more temples, especially with the baptism. You know, the kids would come in, half would go get confirmed, same name, half would go get baptized, their name, and then switch. And apparently it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So does anything else really matter? I don't know. It makes you think.
Doesn't this sound a lot like they described the great apostasy? I mean, didn't they say that the ordinances would be altered, the rituals wouldn't be quite done the right way? That was going to be a sign that the great apostasy was occurring. Now it's just a part of the ongoing restoration.
That's right.
Well, we'll see what else they change. They always will be changing. That's one thing that's constant in Mormonism. As much as they say that things are constant, God is eternal, and nothing changes, it changes all the time. The next story we've got, folks, is a tale of a dentist, another dentist. This isn't the same dentist we covered some months back, maybe a year ago or so. This is somebody different. And this is a Orem, Utah pediatric dentist, Robert Bruce Howell. By the way, this is another abuse section. This one also happens to be a child as well. This person, I believe, was in high school when this happened. He has been arrested and jailed for allegedly sexually abusing a high school student who interned at his Orem pediatric dentistry practice. According to police, the abuse occurred during a bogus sports physical that the dentist performed on the teen inside his office in 2024. Howell faces suspicion of object rape, a first-degree felony, and forcible sexual abuse. He has not yet been formally charged and is being held without bail in the Utah County Jail. The victim told investigators that she interned at the office between January and May of 2024. What began as professional communication quickly turned personal, with Howell sending her more than 3,600 text messages. Wow. Police describe many of the messages as highly manipulative, including religious and life advice, late-night scripture reading sessions over the phone, and discussions that blurred professional boundaries. Howell also treated the teen for a cold, prescribed medication, provided extensive dental work that she was expected to work off, and bought her hundreds of dollars worth of athletic equipment after she mentioned being a high school athlete. So here are some of the documents, by the way. On the left hand is the affidavit of probable cause. On the right is, let's see what this one is, an order to hold without bail. So you've got those two. This next one here on the left was a public safety assessment report. This is page 1 and 2 of that report. It sort of lays out, based on the conditions of the case, how serious this is for him, that if he were to go on bail, does he have to have a higher bail, lower bail, more regulations on his bail, more rules about what he has to follow, or no bail at all. And so there's that. I'll just note here, and then I had one more document. I'll actually take this off the screen because I added it while we were talking just before the show started. You had mentioned a few other documents, and I'd forgotten to grab these. So I grabbed this one. This was a previous issue with the same guy, Robert Bruce Howell. This was, trying to see a date here, back in 2019. And this was an issue of false claims for medical benefits. So this isn't his first run-in with the law. So there's that. I'll take that back off, put this back up. And then just note that before her sports season, the victim, Howell offered to conduct her required pre-participation physical exam at the dental office. Rebecca, can you imagine your dentist giving you your athletic physical?
Yeah, I don't know under what circumstance that would happen. I had all boys. They were all sports kids. We did all these physicals, but there are plenty of other places you can get a sports physical from. They usually would have them at rec centers and, physicians. Yeah, I don't know why a dentist would be giving you a physical, but he obviously had set himself up as a trusted adult in her life. And I feel like her parents must have trusted him too. They must have said, okay, my daughter's interning for him. They must have noticed some of the gifts, or, I don't know, maybe not, but I feel like maybe the family trusted him and that's how it happened. But yeah, that's very odd.
Yeah, during the exam, police say he performed a breast and vaginal examination with no legitimate medical purpose and sexually assaulted her. Howell later admitted to investigators that he conducted the exam, including checking her breast and vagina, but claimed the only other checks were blood pressure and heart listening. He acknowledged skipping. By the way, that's all it was. It was just those 4, Rebecca.
Yeah,
No
that's
big
it.
deal. Seems like that. Those 4, 2 of those 4 are plenty, enough. He acknowledged skipping standard orthopedic and musculoskeleton portions, and that such exams fell outside his dental license. I'm thinking the breast and vagina did too.
Yeah.
Weird.
That's not your standard sports physical. I will say that. I can't see any realm where you would need that for sports.
Yeah, they put a stethoscope on my heart, told me to turn my head and cough, and I moved on to playing football. So
that was it.
Detectives believe there may be additional victims, as the team reported other female employees had left under concerning circumstances. What a crazy story that one is. Any thoughts from you before I head to the next story and get away from all this abuse?
Yeah, no, that was concerning too, when they said other people had left the office, people that didn't speak up, other maybe female interns, and you just do wonder where that rabbit hole is going to go. And I'm sure that, we'll find out. But I was able to figure out, I'm always curious, is he LDS? Is that relevant? And he was a elders quorum ministering secretary. He'd been an executive secretary before. So I couldn't find that he was ever in any leadership positions. But again, just everything he was able to get away with this young woman tells me she trusted him at a certain level, and probably her parents too. Just thought he was a great guy, doing all these things for his intern. What a great opportunity. That's kind of how I read it. And then, completely taking advantage in that way, in a grooming behavior. So yeah, it's a really icky story. Let's just say that. We'll see what happens to him. We'll report on it later, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think anytime a dentist is doing anything but looking in my mouth and checking my teeth, I'm going to object.
From here up, that's it. Right there.
Right.
That's all.
That's it. All right. Our next story, this was LDS researchers. This is the Salt Lake Tribune. LDS researchers unveil a new portrait and sculpture. Do they show the real Joseph Smith? We're back to trying to figure out if Joseph Smith is the man on the daguerreotype. They've got this new painting, new sculpture, and the suggestion here is that the connection from these to the daguerreotype is unmistakable. A Utah artist has unveiled what may be the most historically grounded portrait and sculpture of Joseph Smith ever created. Latter-day Saint artist Joseph Brickey based the new works on the recently rediscovered daguerreotype that many researchers now believe could be the only photograph ever taken of Joseph Smith. Now, I say photograph lightly. Daguerreotype is a different process. It's not actually considered a photograph. The artwork debuted at a conference at Utah Valley University and intended to show what Joseph may have actually looked like. So there's the painting. It looks essentially like the same guy inside that pocket.
Right, the locket.
Locket.
Yeah.
The artwork is a result of years of research into the controversial photograph. While not everyone is convinced that the daguerreotype actually shows Joseph Smith, several historians and forensic experts argue the evidence is now strong enough to treat it as authentic. Others remain skeptical, pointing to the incomplete chain of custody and questions that still surround the image's provenance. I've heard people suggest that maybe the daguerreotype was Hiram But that makes little sense that Emma's wearing Hiram around her neck. So
Exactly.
I think most people, including the LDS Church, by the way, I know they take the official position like, how could we know? But again, they paid 7 figures for the locket. That should be enough to tell you that they think it's something other than just a random photo of a guy. The timing is significant because the LDS Church recently acquired that original daguerreotype, but has stopped short of declaring it authentic, though again, they did allegedly pay 7 figures for the locket, for the image inside. Church officials say they cannot confirm the image is Joseph Smith while acknowledging its historical importance. Well, if it's not him, it's not that historically important. So the debate continues. If the photograph is eventually accepted as genuine, it could fundamentally change how future generations picture Mormonism's founder. For now, though, these new portraits and sculpture represent one artist's attempt to reconstruct Joseph Smith's appearance based on the best evidence currently available. And then I'll just turn here to a couple of images. There is where did you gave me this locket on the left? Is this just a color rendition?
Yeah, the artist did that too. Yeah. And apparently, as I understand it, all of this might have been unveiled at a Joseph Smith descendant family reunion kind of a thing, like earlier, and then nobody was, told to not put that out there. And then it was unveiled finally at UVU. But yeah, the same artist did a sculpture and this color and then that painting. So based on the death mask, as I understand it, and then taking inspiration from the daguerreotype. The best thing to come out of this is that we've all learned how to pronounce daguerreotype. We can use it flawlessly in dinner conversation. So that's the best part.
I learned so many tangent topics and subjects from Mormonism. Why did they give him disheveled hair on the left? I mean, look at on the right, it's much neater, nicer. Yeah. On the left, it's like the guy stuck his finger in an electrical socket. So there's that. Let me see if there's one more. Yep, there's the there is the painting enlarged on the right, the painting inside its frame on the left. These were unveiled this week. So there it is, Joseph Smith. This is what the prophet, this is what many people are saying. This is what he looked like. So this will be the new prophet, Joseph Smith. It'll be interesting to see if the church starts to pick up on this. Well, with that, any thoughts from you on this story?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, we should make clear that the church didn't pay that money. A wealthy donor purchased it and donated it to the church, just like the Mark Hoffman documents, right? They're never going to pay for anything. They got to have that distance there. But I'm sure that it's it. I've always thought it was it. We talked about this when you had this story. We both kind of said, there you are. You just kind of know, you get that vibe. Woo, your skin starts to crawl maybe. But I feel like the church, okay, it's almost inescapable now that this is most likely what he looks like, but I don't see them ever using that particular picture in manuals or anything. They might start to morph their cartoons and their lovely paintings to look a little more like that, but I don't see them using that because, as you and I brought up, he looks like a man. He doesn't look like a beautiful, angelic Ken doll. He looks like a man. And then you start thinking, oh, if he's a man, gosh, he was a man around young girls, and he was a man that, told a lot of people things happened that might not have happened. So I don't know. Do you think they'll ever use it in any manuals, or do you think they'll just kind of maybe morph it a little to look a little like him?
I think 100 years from now, this will be the image of Joseph Smith that we use. But as you point out, they're not going to do that overnight. It's going to take a long, long time, at least a few decades, for them to go, okay, we can just let this be the real Joseph Smith.
Yeah. Because this is not the real Joseph Smith to a lot of people. I told that story about my mom when I showed her the new picture, and she's like, well, that's not him. That's not my Joseph Smith. So we have to wait for everybody to die off, right? And then we'll use the new picture. But it sure is fascinating, the strong feelings that come out when people see that picture. It's very interesting because he looks real. Instead, before he looked like a Greek god or some kind of mythological person. And now he's just a guy, just a real guy.
Yeah, it's interesting how that Joseph Smith somehow disappeared immediately because of various artist renditions and various depictions of him weren't quite accurate. Even Emma would acknowledge that No picture seemed to really grab what her husband looked like. And so I'll just note that Joseph seemed to disappear, that original one, but somebody else maybe has disappeared. You've got something going on in Mongolia with a mission president, Rebecca. What's happening there?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. And you and I both got this information. I saw that you were on the thread, but I don't know if you picked up on it. But I just thought it was kind of fascinating. And I will give a shout out to our friend Diamond Dave, who lives in Mongolia. A lot of you know Dave, and he's been kind of poking around about this and giving us context on what all this really means. It's not necessarily very unusual, but I think it's part of a broader framework of how missionaries sometimes get into other countries and the problems they can run into with remaining in the country and visas. I think we probably all have stories of knowing people in different missions that had issues with that. And it can be kind of scary the way the world is today. So my question is, are the LDS missionaries in Mongolia currently without a mission president residing in the country? And I believe, given a lot of different sources and people that have reached out to me, that this is true. The mission president is no longer in Mongolia with his missionaries. Is that a big deal, Bill, to have your mission president somewhere else? I think maybe it happens sometimes, but for an extended period of time, would you consider that a big deal?
I think leaving a bunch of kids, young adults, in a country on their own in a place far, far away from home, this guy should be there. And I've heard of a story or two where people were without a mission president for a few days or a week because something happened. But hopefully maybe that's not the case here, or it is.
Yeah, no, it looks like it's been longer than a few days. The mission president's name is Bryce Coons. He's only 37, a very young mission president who's there with his family in Mongolia. He's been the mission president there for a year. It says information indicates that the current Mongolian mission president has been denied his residency permit. This permit has to be reissued on a month-to-month basis in order to stay in the country, and it was revoked. It had to do with his ability to reside in Mongolia as far as having a place to live, and that was on a month-to-month basis that these are granted. They lived in an apartment type place that was English speaking, maybe even international. And it seems the mission president only had to leave the country because they had no place to live, not because they were not allowed to be in the country altogether. So just some weird technical issue. So it's not like this vast, scary conspiracy where they're kicking him out, but these things are serious. If you don't have the right kind of visa, if you're not there for the right reason, when they're checking you monthly or whatever, and you don't get it, you can't go back in. It goes on to say the mission president was supposed to serve for 3 years and has been there for a year already. There was information that just prior to this happening, some governmental entities went to every church meeting house one Sunday. Now that is concerning. That I've had that from several sources that happened. And according to Diamond Dave, that, could just be some kind of random check. It doesn't have to be seen as scary. But again, if I were the parent of a Mongolian missionary and his mission president was out of the country and they were checking buildings, I would be a little nervous. I don't know. Somebody else, another source said somebody in their wards in Mongolia as a missionary. I heard that their mission president is out of the country. That's kind of to reaffirm what this other person has said. And since he left when his visa expired, and Mongolia will not renew his religious visa. There's a difference we're going to talk about here. There apparently was also a threat of missionaries being deported, as this missionary that this person knows had Mongolian immigration show up following a sacrament meeting to either talk to or attempt to deport missionaries. So that's, again, anecdotal from someone that knows a missionary there. I have not talked to anybody actually there, just people that are connected to the missionaries. It says the missionaries in Mongolia are under a different type of visa, under a different premise is how they're there. They are there under some sort of Deseret charity visa. Have you heard this before, that missionaries go in as either a teacher or part of a humanitarian sort of a thing? I mean, I think this has been going on for years and years. Have you heard of this, Bill?
I've heard of numerous instances where the church manipulates or massages what someone's going in there for, right, in order to get them in, when in reality, that's not at all what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's it. I remember putting, various guys into the MTC back in the 80s, and the ones going to Mexico were teachers. That's what they were there for. They were teachers, right? Like English teachers. So there's always a little wiggling around there. Goes on to say the mission president is there under the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints umbrella, a religious umbrella. So there's a difference there between how the missionaries entered and how the mission president entered. There's supposed to be a mission split for Mongolia soon. This was in the church news, with a second mission president scheduled to get there in July. He will be coming in under the same Deseret Charity umbrella like the missionaries are under, not the umbrella that is causing the first mission president the problems. And the new mission president for the second mission was born in Mongolia. You can see the picture there. He lives in Texas now, but he'll be returning there supposedly next month. So hopefully if the first mission president isn't back, he can pick up some of the slack. And they are saying, of course, that this mission president is Zooming with the elders. He's coordinating things from Japan where he is. But again, I don't know. If I had a kid there on a mission, I might kind of go, hey, you know what? Get your president back in the country. So information indicates that the LDS Church has filed a lawsuit there in Mongolia against whomever has issued the order denying the mission president residency. And that's probably because it sounds like it's some kind of technical glitch about maybe renting an apartment month to month, not being able to prove established residency. The church is suing some entity in Mongolia for discrimination and religious rights to be there in the country. The LDS Church is also currently in the planning stages of building the temple. You can see there in October of 2025, Elder Anderson went there and they were just thrilled and excited that the temple was going to be coming in. But now they have this little snafu. So I don't know. It sounds like the mission president has to remain outside of the country because of a little glitch. But what that was as far as entities going to LDS buildings and checking on missionaries there, I don't know what that is about. So we'll just have to wait and see, but I hope the missionaries are okay. And I hope the mission president is okay. I mean, that's got to be really frustrating. He and his whole family living in Japan, you know, where they're called to serve in Mongolia. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah. Number one, obviously hoping for the safety of the missionaries that are there. But it is a strange thing to have been in a church that is willing to be dishonest at times. Again, this isn't the first time sort of hearing reports about missionaries being under one visa and the mission president under another, and various reasons, like you said, of being assigned as a teacher. Mm-hmm. A lot of people in the chat are pointing out that Mongolia is not the most workable with evangelizing religions in their country. And I would hope for the missionaries' safety's sake that the LDS Church has a policy of telling the truth around these things, but knowing Mormonism, I have my doubts.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it does have to do with banning proselyting or curtailing proselyting. And that workaround is to say we're here as humanitarian. I mean, I knew people that served in Moscow back in the day, and that was the same kind of thing. They couldn't do anything except for walk around and smile and hope that somebody would talk to them, which is why only really super attractive people were called to that mission, so that people would approach them. But they had visa issues there too. And it was kind of entertaining stories. Oh, we were running for the border. Oh, we barely made it back. Kids, I think it's funny, but it's not funny. We're dealing with other countries and other governments. You don't have any standing there. So it's a cautionary tale, and we'll see what happens, but we hope for the best for everybody.
There were even stories, I think it was Monson, who had to sneak a manual in or something to a country and wasn't following the rules of how those things worked. And so it wouldn't be the first time. Our next story, thank you, Rebecca. Our next story is on this gender gap survey. Let me put that back up. Gender gap survey that BYU did. So a new study out of BYU found that the LDS Church, and by the way, this runs right up against Jeff Strong's data. Mm-hmm. And, maybe they mesh together. It seems to me that you can't have one and the other. So I'm curious, where the data is and who's got the factual data about who's staying and who's leaving the church. But in this study, a new study out of BYU found that the LDS Church does a better job of keeping people actively involved than almost any other religion in America. But the numbers also tell a more complicated story. About 42% of people raised Latter-day Saint remain active into adulthood, which is the highest active retention rate among the major faiths that were studied in the survey. Even among young adults age 18 to 24, active participation is still around 40%, putting the church near the top nationally. But that also means the majority of people born into the church are no longer active, and only about half continue to identify as Latter-day Saints at all. The study also highlights some trends that won't surprise many observers in our audience. Men are remaining active at higher rates than women. We've been talking about that a ton here on the newscast. And younger generations are less likely to stay engaged than older ones. Just a little cue to the LDS Church. You got to stop worrying about the old people. They'll be gone sooner than later. It's the new young ones you've got to make sure you cater to. Researchers say the strongest predictor of staying in the church isn't demographics or geography. It's whether members report having had personal spiritual experiences, strong family religious practices, and meaningful friendships within their congregation. Gordon B. Hinckley said that everybody needed to have a calling, a friend, and be nourished by the good word of God. Yeah. Seems like that still applies. The report says that LDS retention today is about 50%. It also acknowledges that earlier data suggested that 82% retention was happening in the 1980s, falling to 58% in the 2000s. And now it's somewhere in the range of 46 to 50%. Now that part, I think, goes along with Jeff Strong's data pretty well. And that's a remarkable admission, even if BYU's data is true. Even if you accept all of their methodology, they're documenting that roughly a 40% decline in retention over the last 4 decades. And if you remember what Jeff Strong said, he said over the last 2 decades of the active, faithful, all-in Mormons, 40% of them walked away. Your thoughts on the BYU gender gap study data that came out?
Yeah, I love that this is coming out along with Jeff Strong's data. And it's so funny because they know what they need to do. It's community, community, community. That's what made all of us stay in so long. And as they cut programs and change things and cut funding, you can see the numbers plummet, right? You can see the percentages. In the 80s, did you say 56? That was me. I mean, you know, everything was the church, all the activities, all the fun, all the friendships, BYU, all of that. That doesn't really exist anymore that I can see. If you follow social media, a lot of people, even faithful, are saying, what happened to my ward? You know, where are my friends? Or it's cliquey, or there's gossip. You know, the community is gone, and maybe that's just a symptom of the world the way it is now. But they stay in high demand, high control. There's so much to do that if you're doing it, you're going to stay. And that's why men stay. Men, it works for them. A lot of them, if you're a straight white male, it absolutely does. And that's who's staying. But I think they're starting to recognize this, and we'll have a story later on about this. They are bending over backwards to try to engage the youth. They are trying to let them do everything that none of the rest of us could ever do, right? They're trying to make it very easy and very fun to be a youth in the church. And that means, I don't know, brushing away a lot of the core things that we all had to do and letting them kind of free to be you and me. So it'll be interesting to see if that works. But we've talked about, you know, younger mission ages. The kids are locked down through birth, through that mission, married right away, married with a child. I mean, they're just trying to keep that conveyor belt with absolutely no gaps, no chance to come up for air, to even think about what you really might want to do. Will it work? It might work. I think they know that being born into the church, having kids born, is the really only way to maintain converts at this point. And I think they're trying their hardest to do that. But I don't know. That ship may have sailed. I mean, that's 40%. You got to look at how many people are walking away and why. So, and more data is coming out. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was 82% retention rate in the 80s, somewhere between 46 and 50% now, with 40% having walked away in the last 4 decades. That's big stuff. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. By the way, you noted, and I noted that women in the church is having a much harder time of retaining them. And I'll just note, you can keep all the men you want. They hold the priesthood. They do the leadership. But if somebody's not there to give birth to that next generation of Mormons, there won't be any Mormons in that next generation. Certainly a lot less of them at the rate we're at. So there's that. Your next story here is a get to know your bishop night. And it sounds like maybe this didn't go too well. Should we have put this one in our CSA segment?
Oh, I don't know. You want to try to be charitable. Before I do that, though, I will say I just got a text from RFM. I don't know if you want to look on our text thread and pull up these pictures. He says, we just got back to our hotel, but it's shut down with crime scene tape. And he's included some pictures. I don't know if Bill wants to show this. So I don't know what's going on with RFM. I think he was going to try to call in, but he's, I believe, not able to get in to his hotel because of something that's happened there. I don't know. Maybe he can solve the crime. You know, RFM, he's really good at that kind of stuff. So yeah, we can put
I'll try to
put
put pictures and put them up while you're going over this.
Yeah, that's fine. So this was an activity that was suggested by the Young Women's Advisory Board. They posted it. I'm going to pull it up here. They posted it on Facebook. Get to know your bishop night, right? And I don't know if you've ever been in a ward like this, Bill. I was in primary for a very long time. That's where I relegated myself to stay away from all the rest of the stuff. But we always had that, you know, if it's your birthday, here's a special coupon. You take it to the bishop's office. You'll get a hug and some candy, you know, get to know your bishop. He comes into primary and talks to you. I made a post about this and I had people say, oh yeah, at girls camp, we had a night where we painted the fingers and toenails of the bishopric, you know, things like that. There's this idea that you want your kids to be familiar and trust this man who is just your neighbor down the street, right? But this was an activity, a suggestion, get to know your bishop. It says, how well do you know your bishop? Sometimes bishops can feel intimidating simply because you only see them in formal church settings. But the bishop is someone who was once a teenager, young adult, a young husband, a disciple trying to follow Christ one day at a time. The activity is just kind of get to know him, ask him questions. And you can see here on the screen, there's just all these different questions they suggest, just talking to him. So I kind of picture like a fireside where the bishop's there and everybody can talk to him and chat, get intimately familiar with him. What's your favorite food, your favorite scripture, all these different suggestions. And at the end, it says, add a dessert, of course, because it's a Mormon activity, and a game to make the activity relaxed and welcoming. The goal isn't just to learn the facts about your bishop, right? So you're asking him all these questions, but that's not the goal. What is the goal? The goal is to help your young women feel safe, connected, and comfortable, seeking spiritual guidance from someone who truly loves them. Okay. What do you think about that activity, Bill? You have girls.
Yeah. On the backside of Mormonism, looking back, we should be really careful about portraying unsafe boundaries as safe, creating spaces where young women, children, female children, feel safe to go sit with a stranger man behind a closed door. In other words, when Nelson responded to, and maybe it was Monson, but I think it was Nelson, responded to Sam Young and said, okay, if a parent requests a second adult in the room, that should be accommodated. Well, why would you have a second adult? Because children shouldn't be behind closed doors with stranger man. And here is the LDS Church saying our main goal, our number one goal in doing this is to help female children feel safe speaking to stranger man behind a closed door.
Yep, that's exactly it. And not just a bishop, but getting comfortable with anybody who might quote scriptures to you, right? Didn't we just talk about a dentist who was quoting scriptures? Do you know what I mean? Any older man who exudes this, you can trust me, I'm in the church, look, I'm spiritual, look, let's have a scripture study. It just makes these young women too comfortable with that, just too comfortable. And I know some people say, oh, that's being alarmist. But I look over at Floodlit. Here's a little graphic here. 138 LDS sex abuse cases found. Now, some of these are allegations, some of these are convictions, but these are 138 sitting bishops. We're not talking about all the cases we cover where I find out, oh, he used to be a bishop. Oh, he used to be a stake president. These are people that these alleged, or in some cases, they've gone through the whole court system. These happened while they were in their office. And somebody was asking them to participate in an activity like this to get comfortable with them. So I posted about this a couple days ago because I thought it was very interesting. And I wanted to see what people would say. Some people said I'm, overreacting, I'm being an alarmist. But interestingly, somebody else made this comment. And then another person chimed in and let me know this is someone who works at Curtin McConkie. So maybe this is somebody that goes through social media and has to make sure that the correct information is out there. So this person said about my post, the Floodlit database contains mostly just allegations, not confirmed facts. Every time a complaint's filed, it is added to the Floodlit database. How many of the 138 cases you refer to involved confirmed cases of abuse by a serving bishop? To be clear, it has happened, but a child is far less likely to be molested by their bishop than by their school teacher. And how many minors are rescued from abuse because they are able to disclose it to a trusted adult like a bishop who calls your own freaking hotline? Curtin McConkie, sorry that I had to say that. That just seems really ridiculous. Yes, having a trusted adult you can turn to is often how abuse stops. What do you think about that statement? It was just a comment. I didn't recognize that it was from somebody that worked at Curtin McConkie until someone pointed that out to me.
Yeah. The trouble on the Mormon side, a believing Mormon and specifically the legal representation of the church, they want to point out like, hey, don't take away the opportunity for kids to tell trusted adults bad things that have happened to them so that things can be dealt with and taken care of. But I'm not at all pointing to the idea of we should stop the ability of a child to go to a trusted adult and say, can I talk to you? I need to share something. Counselor in a school, a trusted teacher, a church leader, by all means. Mormonism does something very different. It sends out a request for the young people to come in, go behind a closed door, and answer questions about sexuality and worthiness when that leader is a lay minister who has no training around how to protect children. Okay, they do a 2-hour training video and you sign off that you did it. Great. But that's not the kind of training I'm speaking of. When you talk about ministers and other religions go to school and get education, they learn various things about how to support people who have horrific things happen in their life. A Mormon guy was just a plumber last week. He's still a plumber this week. He just so happens now to be called of God to be a bishop. And what does that mean? That means somebody above felt good about it. So what? And as you pointed out earlier, Rebecca, it creates unsafe boundaries. It doesn't have to be that the bishop is always the molester. It's that the church creates an unsafe boundary and portrays it as safe so that when these kids go off to college, and now this girl is on a date with a returned missionary, and she goes, he has priesthood, he's serving the Lord, he's temple worthy, he's listening to the Spirit speak to him, he goes to church every week. Why not go back to his place? I can trust him. And then when a date rape happens, you often hear in some of these stories that these women experienced a sense of trust in the other person, that when the whole experience unfolded, they never should have placed trust in that person in the first place. And the reason they placed trust in them is because the Mormon system taught their parents to teach them to do that. Yeah. And so they get it from multiple angles, and they learn over and over and over again that unsafe boundaries are safe boundaries when they really aren't.
Yeah, that's a good point about trusting the priesthood, because that's an umbrella that a lot of men, they're going to fall into at church, obviously. And if you're taught, especially as a young woman, like I was too, you can trust your priesthood leader. That's anybody. And you can end up in an unsafe situation. I ended up in an unsafe situation with a priesthood leader when I was a young 15-year-old. And it's just because you don't think about it. You can trust them. You're told to trust them. And yeah, some pretty horrific things can happen. So anyway, interesting. And I know some people say you're just an alarmist, but I agree with everything you said, Bill. There's a much bigger picture here.
Yeah, bad things happen, and it looks like bad things. Oh, let me take this one down. I'll put this up. Looks like maybe bad things have happened where RFM is. This is a picture of the parking lot of the hotel he's staying at. You don't see it very well here. You'll see it in the next picture. But the hotel there on the right, and you can see the caution tape where my cursor is, police tape, I should say. And so if I go to the next slide, it does have caution on it. but something's going on. It doesn't look like they're painting the building. I don't know what's happening.
No. Do you think RFM did something and like they figured it out and put the tape up while he was away?
And maybe he ruined the hot tub or something. I don't know. No idea.
Maybe there was an incident. We'll find out. But
Well-
yeah, we hope you're okay, RFM. My goodness.
We'll get more from him when he gets
All
back
right.
here. Our next story here is that the church has released new guidance for young people preparing to serve missions. And while most of it isn't groundbreaking, it does show how the missionary program continues to evolve. One notable change is that missionaries no longer have to get healthy wisdom teeth removed before leaving. The church now says that they should only come out if there's an actual medical reason, which could save families unnecessary procedures and expenses. Now, this was such a big deal forever and ever and ever.
Oh, yeah.
You wanted to serve a mission, you had to have your wisdom teeth pulled. And so you know, I live in Utah now. I used to live in Ohio, but live in Utah now. And I drive down the road and you see these signs where, and by the way, we talked about a dentist tonight, but where dentists advertise like $1,000, we pull all your wisdom teeth. And it's obviously catered to missionaries, prospective missionaries. But it's an interesting thing that the prophets of old said wisdom teeth had to be pulled. And the prophet today says wisdom teeth, not a big deal. These are the important matters of revelation, Rebecca. What do you think?
Yeah, no, my kids went through that and it was a big deal. Like it was part of mission prep. You know, you couldn't get your paperwork sent in until you had either had it done or had the appointment scheduled. And it was in the middle of your senior year, right? There's all this stuff going on. You have to schedule the time. And my kids did the, $600 all in one day kind of a thing. It was just a rite of passage and all the friends would show up and bring you the soft food. I mean, it's a rite of passage. It's kind of ceremonial when you're going on your mission. And I know the reason was you don't want them in a foreign country with your wisdom teeth giving you trouble. But healthy wisdom teeth, you can get those pulled out when you need to get them pulled out, when your dentist tells you they need to get pulled out, not now when you're, 17 because you're going at 18, right? 17. It's even dialed back even since my kids went. So yeah, but that paperwork is intensive. I for those parents out there that have done it, I know some of you have had missionaries have them out now. It's intensive. The medical, the dental, all of that. It is. The whole family is like immersed in it, trying to get that missionary out there. So, and earlier than ever now.
Yeah, I wonder if the need to get them out, if the Lord just thought now is the time, or in the ongoing restoration, the teeth are no longer needed to be pulled, or if the church has an increased confidence in some of those countries of the world to be able to handle things when they do happen. So there's that. The church now says, again, I already said that. Let's see here. The guidance also encourages prospective missionaries to start the application process as early as 150 days before they're available to serve, giving them more time to handle paperwork, medical appointments, passports, and visas. This is an image of that conference. You covered this in a recent episode of Mormonish where you guys noted this might be the first time the church is doing a data breakout of how many missionaries make up their numbers. And you can see on the screen there behind President Oaks, 55 new missions, 506 total missions, 76,500 young teaching missionaries, 4,600 young service missionaries, and 6,000 full-time senior missionaries. I don't know, 20% of them are probably on their second mission. Yeah. But there is 6,000 of them serving. This was an article in the church news that was talking about that. President Oaks says soon there will be more missionaries than ever. We are breaking records left and right. We are on the way to 87,000 missionaries serving. So there it is.
And again, that means nothing. It was an excellent episode with Ron Jorgensen, a great researcher. He tracks all the stats and everything. You guys should check it out. It's on Mormonish a couple of weeks ago. There are simply more kids of this age right now. There was a baby boom in 2008 in the church, probably because there was a baby boom 22 years before that, and that boom had children. There are simply more children, young adults, I should say, and that is why there are more missionaries just because there's more of a pool of that age. And that's why there's a huge push to get these guys hooked up, married, and have kids right now so that they can create the next boom in 20 years. But everything will course correct. You will see a lot more missionaries in the coming days. I've always wanted to say that. But it's simply statistics. They're just more kids. That's all.
Yeah, there's that masterpiece, right?
Masterpiece. Yeah, he does a great job tracking all this and membership stats and everything. And just, I always ask him the question, okay, our faithful families coming to us going, oh my gosh, there's more. What do we say back? And he gives you a very quick sentence. That's great, Mom. It's because there are more LDS kids that age and they're just cycling through the system. Isn't that nice? Right? So you can throw cold water on it in a very nice way.
There we go. I'll just note here, the article also highlights just how much the missionary program has grown. Again, we're talking about that in the previous slide. Church leaders say they're on the verge of having more full-time missionaries than at any point in church history. And they're continuing to emphasize that missionary assignments are made by apostles under prophetic direction, blah, blah, blah. I guess they also stress the importance of disclosing mental health and medical history up front. And I think this is at least a little bit of a step forward than where it used to be. Often, they would figure out like how to send sort of those struggling out on a mission. And I think it's better to deal with those things before they go out. So this is reflecting a growing recognition that missionary success isn't just about worthiness. It also, at least in part, seems to be making sure that missionaries are physically and emotionally prepared for the demands of the field. This was one of the graphics that got shown for that. So if folks want to pause it, you're welcome to do that and read each of those on the side.
Is that a tooth? There's a tooth right there. That's great.
Yeah. Don't let your dentist give you physicals, though.
Yes. No. And if he does, from the chin up, that's right. Yeah. And as Masterpiece pointed out, the service mission is brilliant because in the past, missionaries had to come home and then they're no longer counted as a missionary. If they come home for mental and physical health, now they come home and they continue serving. They're still on the rolls as a missionary, only they're finishing up at home. So service missions allow you to keep these great stats. It looks incredibly healthy. And it is a good opportunity for kids. I get that. Not everybody who wants to serve can do proselyting. So I'm not being that jaded, but it certainly also keeps the stats there when in the past you were just released and sent home.
Yeah, those 6,000 would just be minused off the numbers and subtracted off the numbers. And instead, they're still counted. And as you say, I think it's a good thing. If somebody is having a hard time on a mission and they want to come home, they should absolutely be allowed to. They're an adult, come home. And to still give them ways in which they can connect with the church and serve, I think is great. But it is a way to inflate the numbers for sure. Okay, let me go to this last one. President Dallin Oaks used the occasion to reaffirm some of the church's most exclusive truth claims. He taught that the LDS Church is not just one good church among many, but the only true and living church on the earth. He said that claim rests on three things. First, that only the LDS Church has the fullness of Christ's doctrine and God's complete plan for humanity. Well, it can't be, because it's different than it was last week, different than it was 3 weeks ago, different than it was a decade ago. It seems like that's really an impossible statement to defend. But
and it's such an interesting thing to say, given that, we had that whole debacle with being left off as Christian on the military list. And we're like, no, we are Christian. But here we are saying the things that make everybody think we're not Christian, right? We're the only ones with the truth. He's saying it all out loud right there. So you wonder why people think we're not. These kind of statements.
Yeah, they don't know how to just play nice. You can't on one hand say those people aren't being nice to us. And then on the other hand, you're like, well, we're the only true church. Everyone else is wrong. Exactly. So there's that. Second, that only it possesses priesthood authority and the keys needed to perform saving ordinances. And third, that only the restoration provides the correct understanding of who God and Jesus are through Joseph Smith's first vision and modern revelation. Cue Brigham Young's Adam God theory. And suddenly we're back to wondering if prophets get it right or wrong. Oaks also pushed back against the increasingly popular idea that all religions are equally valid paths to God, right up the alley of what you were saying, Rebecca. He argued that if all churches are equally true, then restored doctrines, priesthood authority, temples, and modern prophets become unnecessary. Out of the mouth of babes. Instead, he emphasized that the church's message is fundamentally different because it claims exclusive divine authority, continuing revelation, and a unique witness of Jesus Christ through the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith. In other words, despite a softer public image in recent years, President Oaks makes it clear that the church has not backed away from its longstanding claim that it alone possesses the complete truth and the authority of God. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I just can't believe the timing of this is crazy. He's literally saying point by point the issues that all these different articles I've been reading, and a lot of us have on social media, with this new hot button that I talked about last or 2 weeks ago. Mormons aren't Christian, right? That's out of the woodwork again with what happened with the DOD. He's saying it out loud. We are the only ones with authority. We're the only ones that have the first vision. We're restored. He is saying it out loud. This is just fodder for any of these other churches that want to say, you want to know why they're not Christian? This is why they're not considered Christian. So I just can't believe he's saying it out loud. It reminds me of Benson, right? Ezra T, who would say, or I'm sorry, Hinckley. Hinckley would say something to the media, like, oh, no, I don't know that we teach that. Yeah, God thing. No, we don't do that. We're not going to become gods. Polygamy. But then he'd go to conference. And with a nudge and a wink, he would let people know, yeah, we still do. Yeah, it's still happening, right? So this is kind of like that. Out in public facing, like you said, very soft. They're like, oh, all churches we respect. To the membership, the mission presidents, he's like, no, we're the only one. We're the true church.
Yeah, they want to have it both ways. Like, everybody play nice, accept us into your group. And then Mormons behind closed doors are like, no one else can be in our group. We're the only ones.
Oh, gosh.
There's that. Our next story, this one I thought was interesting. This has to do with those temple names we get, our new name. Now it's going to be a new name, Rebecca?
Yeah, this is craziness. Again, there's so much interesting, fun stuff out there on Faithful and Post-Mormon social media that if you just look around, you're like, what is happening? And then if you post about it like I do or make a short, you're going to get a lot of information. So I'm calling this What's in a Name? Apparently Randomness. And we are going to be talking about the new name that you receive when you go through the temple for the first time as yourself, right? When you go through on behalf of others, there's another name. But the first time you go through, you get a new name to show that you're a new disciple, And when I went through, and I'll ask you this question, Bill, I was led to believe that this was the name that I was known as in heaven and would be the name, my true self, right? And that it was unique to me, and it was my celestial name, which I think is funny because they already kind of tell you that you don't own your body, right? God gave it to you, you're renting it, and now you don't even own your name. It's kind of disassociative. If you think about it, you're not really you, but that's what I was told. This was my name that I was going to find out. That was my heaven name. Did you hear anything like that, or am I off base?
No, I went through it a different time than you did, and I definitely thought I was getting a special new name that was unique to me. And I didn't know behind the scenes what went into it, but I thought when I got my name and my ex, my wife at the time got her name, my assumption was we got this special name that's our new name. And, we read in the scriptures and Revelation and this idea of getting a new name, and I thought it was going to be unique. And then to find out that everybody on that day got that name, it was like, wah, wah, wah. Yeah.
It was. And we did find that out eventually, that you can track these things. Now, the names themselves have changed over time. Mostly women's names have been changing and retired. Abish is retired. Zena is retired. Some of those older names are retired. The male names tend to be a little more consistent, but there's something called the Temple Name Oracle. I'm sure most of you are aware of this. It's on fullerconsideration.com. And I've been chatting with the person who puts this together about what's been happening. They've been able to track these names, what they are on each consistent day, because people we'll send in the name. Look, I was on this day and this is my name. They're able to come up with this list. So it's pretty complete. I'm going to just go through a couple from about the last 30 years. You can go to the temple oracle. You can, like, I'd forgotten what day I went through the temple, but I remembered my name. So I was able to go over to the one in 1991 and go, oh yeah, I went through on the 17th. There you go. I remember now. But you can track it pretty consistently. And some people have had the idea, wow, to shake people out of this, I'm going to go to the temple. I'm going to hold a sign up that says, have a great day, Helaman, right? Would that be shocking to a member that you know their name? I mean, we've seen this done, right? When you know someone's going through the temple, you can look up what their name will be. But not anymore. I can't believe they finally got around to doing this. I'm very surprised. I really thought that this would have happened a long time ago. So what they have done now is the names are still there. They're still in pairs, right? Always the same female, the same male, but they are going to now randomize kind of the lists, if that makes sense. So a couple of people reached out to me about this. It says every month a new random list is being sent to the temples, different names to each temple, as in a list in different order. Since more male than female names, they're going to be using the prophet spouse names too now more. And we'll talk about that in a second. But does that make sense? It used to be this was it. Every temple in the world on this day gave you this name. Now, different temples are going to get different, not combinations. Those will be the same as I understand it, but different days so that nobody can track it and nobody knows. What do you think about that?
It seems the only reason this was created was to thwart those ex-Mormons who created the temple name oracle so that people cannot know who someone else's new name is.
No, that's exactly it. And I was kind of alerted to this I found a post where somebody said, hey, I'm a mom. My son went through the temple. I knew his name. And I whispered it to him and he goes, no, that's not my name. And she was really shocked. I found out today that she was somebody who I had met just a couple months ago. She's like, that's my post. So that's how it all works. It's crowdsourced. But isn't that interesting? Now we can no longer know, although the oracle is pretty confident that if we keep sending things in, if we do, that there may be a way, if there's any kind of rhyme or reason to it, to be able to do it. But this is interesting what this other person said, the prophet spouses' names. I don't know if you realize that, but in the past, there aren't very many biblical or Book of Mormon names, are there, for women? And if they are, they're usually like harlots. So they have retired a lot of the past names, which were some of them polygamous wives' names, I believe, but they're going to be using, if they need new names in the future, the names of prophet spouses. Now they already do, I think, let me see, Emma, Lucy, Sarah, Camille, and Flora are on the list, and those are spouses. But here are the other prophet names of their wives right here. So I wonder, will we see a Wendy someday, right? Somebody who goes through the temple in 10 years, there could be a Wendy. There could be a Dancel. We don't know, but they're going to be using, apparently, the names of the prophet spouses. What do you think about that?
When I look at the list, when you said Flora, my first thought went to Flora Woodworth, who was 17 years old. I sure hope that Mormonism creating new names for its men and women are not using the names of the child wives of Joseph Smith. That would be really disgusting. So I hope that's not the case. But man, if you get Dancel, if you get President Nelson's first wife, Marjorie for Hinckley, Wendy Nelson, his second wife, that I don't think I want any of those either.
Polygamous wives' names would be really, really problematic. Imagine going through and getting Fanny. I mean, honestly, and if you didn't have any idea where that came from. So it's interesting to look at. And, it reminded me of something that I hadn't thought about for a long time. And that is that a woman in the LDS church can still not officially know, right? Unless your husband decides to tell you his temple name. So I just thought, for all the strides that have happened, all the things that they're trying to convince women that they do have power, they do have the priesthood, I feel like you would just say back to someone, if they said, I have everything a man has in the church, I would say, what's your husband's temple name? And I just wonder if that might make them go, oh yeah, So I don't know what you think about that, but I'd totally forgotten that the women cannot know their husband's name, but the husband can know the wife's name because the husband has to call them forth on that final day?
It was a secret. I didn't know when
Mhm.
I got to the veil that was going to happen. Only when they made sure that I went through my process before my ex, when we got married, when she went through hers. So I get pulled through the veil after doing the whole, knee to knee and shoulder to shoulder thing, and get pulled through. And they immediately escort me over to the other side and say, "You're going to be the one who pulls your wife through." So now she's talking to some person through the veil. A hand comes through to pull her through, and it turns out to be me. I don't think people should be caught off guard by that. And I'll just note to you, Rebecca, you have the original here, the temple name Oracle, and they've got the various names on there. If you see where my cursor is, you see, like you said, Flora is on there. So to the LDS Church, who is Flora? Because these are names based on people in church history or in the scriptures. Please tell me you aren't using the child brides of Joseph Smith to give people their new names. You've got
I think Flora is the name. I can't remember, one of the more, 20th century prophets, but I do believe some of those older names were polygamous wives. You had some very unusual ones. So it might be something interesting to research exactly where the names came from, because I feel like they're picking them. Well, it's interesting. They said, I did a little bit of research in the 1840s or so, you would always get Abraham or Sariah. Everybody got that. That's what it was. The very same name. Then it was kind of up to the people in the temple to assign you a name, just whatever you felt like that day, but that had its problems and it was too random. In 1965 is when they correlated it and started making these lists. And like I said, the names have kind of come and gone. Women's names are more problematic because there aren't as many of them. But now we're kind of on this set list, but we'll see. Like some of them, the name will mean something in a different language, like Xena means something, not great in another language. So they'll kind of get rid of those old timey names if there's a problem like that. Right. But yeah, it looks like going forward, it could be some of our current prophet names. But yeah, it's just a fascinating. I wonder what people who are never Mormons that are listening to this, because, we both have some in our audiences are going, the what? We just take it for granted that it is what it is. But when you look at it through a never Mormon lens, I can imagine that it just seems completely crazy.
Yeah. Something not crazy. They've got a new visitor center in Nauvoo. This is interesting. Deseret News put an article out June 25th, 2026. This was the Church News where it originally came out, and then the Deseret News reposted it. The church has opened a brand new visitor center next to the Nauvoo Temple, and it's more than just a museum. And I'll just say the message here is intentional, what they share and what they don't share. So rather than focusing primarily on the complicated history of Nauvoo, the exhibits are designed to connect everything back to Jesus Christ and modern temple worship. Church leaders say they want visitors to see Nauvoo not as a chapter in Mormon history, but as a place where many of today's temple ordinances and covenants first came together. What's interesting is what that emphasis leaves in the background. Nauvoo was also the setting for some of the most controversial events in church history, including the introduction of plural marriage, secret councils, political power struggles, and Joseph Smith's final years. Those issues are not the centerpiece here. Instead, the visitor center tells a streamlined story focused on faith, sacrifice, temples, and Jesus. It's another example of the church continuing to present its history through a carefully curated lens, highlighting the parts that reinforce today's message while giving much less attention to the more difficult chapters of church history. Your thoughts on the new Nauvoo Temple Visitor Center?
Yeah, I could do a whole podcast on this, and I have. I'm going to talk about that at the end, but you are not wrong about Nauvoo. Someone in the comments said Mormon Mecca, and this is it. It was really obvious to me when I visited Independence and Liberty and all that over Christmas that the church is dialing that back. Nauvoo is where it's at, and they are really amping that up. There's a new performance center. There are missionaries being called there to perform. There's going to be pageants. There already are pageants, and it's all exactly what you said. Kind of gloss over the church history, and it's all about Jesus. Now, there's a gorgeous Tiffany stained glass window in this visitor center that they cannot stop talking about. I have been following this visitor center since it was first proposed, and it is very much like temple building. This is what my episode was about. Same kind of playbook, same kind of tactics, same kind of I'm going to sue you. In the episode that I'll promote a little bit about the end, we show the city council going, I'm voting for it, but I don't want to. I don't have a choice. They come out and say it. There was some interesting shenanigans where the area, well, first of all, President Hinckley said nothing will ever be built there. Right? They had to kind of backpedal on that and say, oh, it was never really officially said, right? And they also, it was not zoned for a visitor center. It was only zoned for a religious worship building. So the LDS Church put in their proposal for the visitor center that they're going to hold sacrament meetings there. It is a place of worship. It is actually a church building. And they've added some areas where they're going to do that. So anyway, just the same kind of shenanigans to get it built. And again, it's that we can't go into the temple. What the hell is going on over there? It's sacred, but also secret. So now you can go into this visitor center where they have, cutouts and pictures and models and things like that. And I think this is the wave of the future with visitor centers. They're just trying to do everything they can to show people what happens in there. But most people would be like, yeah, but the building's right there. Why can't I find out what's happening? So anyway, yeah, I've been following this for a while. You can tell I'm kind of passionate about it. I have friends in Nauvoo, the friends that are not the LDS people, and it caused a lot of controversy, a lot of problems. It caused people to quit city council, if I remember correctly. It was a big deal. Same playbook, just like temple building.
Yeah, the one thing you're probably not going to hear inside that visitor center is Christian rock music, but maybe you're not going to hear Christian rock music anywhere inside Mormonism.
No, that's the issue. You are going to hear it now. And this ties in exactly to what you said about maintaining and retaining the youth, right? So this meme right here is based on an actual experience of mine when I went visiting teaching, back when I used to visit teach. And the sister said, I listened to Christian rock music. It was this huge confession and this weight off of her shoulders. And I put this on here to show people how it used to be. I don't know how many times I can say it. You were not allowed to listen to Christian rock music. We heard it from over the pulpit. We heard it from our parents. I have to apologize to my high school friend, Cassie, who invited all of us who were LDS to a Baptist rock, Christian rock gathering, and we all had to say no. My parents told me that the devil uses that kind of music to give you a message that isn't Mormonism. Here's an example, Boyd K. Packer, right? We remember him and his little factory. He also had a lot to say about Christian rock music. There have been a number of efforts to take sacred gospel themes and tie them to modern music. Heaven forbid, in the hope of attracting our young people to the message. Few events in all of human history surpass the spiritual majesty of the first vision. We would all be ill-advised to describe that event. The visit of Elohim and Jehovah in company with rock music, even soft rock music, or to take equally sacred themes and set them to a modern beat. I do not know how that can be done and result in increased spirituality. I think it cannot be done. Well, just go over to the Fourth Strength of Youth, all those albums. They've taken all the gospel themes and they have put them to the beat of rock music. And now, okay, I just had to Google it, right? I had to Google LDS youth music, and here it is. Here they are. They look like youth pastors. They got their hands in the air. They're praising. Okay, that is something that could not have been done in my day. Had I tried to praise, my mom probably would have slapped my hand down with love, but we don't do that, right? False tradition of the apostasy. But look at all of this. And again, I believe it's the music to attract the kids. I think that's what it is. I think that's what they're doing. So there is a letter that has gone out to stakes and wards. Latter-day Saint youth are invited to celebrate faith through local music experiences. This is absolutely incredible to me because some of it is supposed to take place in the chapel. Seriously, it really is down as up as down. I don't even know what to think. So Youth Musical Experience 2026. And it says that this needs to be enacted by the end of 2026. So they got to get their act together. They got to start having these. Before the end of 2026, units may choose to hold musical devotionals or other in-person musical experiences like those listed in this notice. Preparation for devotionals can begin now by reserving a date and adding the event to your local calendar. So the first thing is a musical devotional in the chapel. There's a huge catalog of Christian music to choose from. If you go over to the YSA, on Instagram and on Spotify, they have all of these songs, right? All about, well, just what Boyd K. Packer said, the first vision. I think there's actually a song called Vision. He must be rolling over in his grave, right? So these devotionals should last about 60 minutes. They should involve the youth and congregation, regardless of their musical ability. I am literally guessing that there will be clapping. I'm not kidding. If you watch these concerts that are broadcast, they've already had big concerts that are broadcast locally. Now they want it on a local level. There's clapping, there's praising, there's all of that. And it says it's an opportunity for youth to gather. It's youth led, that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that they're going to do. I'll stop right here for a second. Bill, is this blowing your mind? I mean, I know you weren't really a youth in the church, so you did not understand the moratorium on any of that kind of music, but does this seem unusual to you or like a turnaround?
I wasn't a youth in the church, but as a bishop in the church, I knew what kinds of music was allowed inside that chapel, what kind of instruments were allowed, and what instruments were not allowed. You were very limited. String instruments, for instance, piano, violin, cello, that kind of thing. But you were so limited in the kind of instruments that could be played and the kinds of music that could go on inside the chapel. It really is a different Mormonism than when I was in the church in my young adulthood.
Yeah, no, I forgot. You're right. As a bishop, you would have definitely enforced this kind of thing. And we were warned all the time about the heavy bass beat, right? Any music that had a heavy bass beat might get you to do things that you didn't want to do. But now they put that heavy bass beat to music about Jesus, right? So to me, it's all extremely manipulating, and I just can't even tell you how hilarious I find that this is okay, and how many people are rolling over in their graves. The other thing they want to have happen is a youth concert. This is a bigger event outside, more, like you said, drums, electric guitars, clapping. They're putting all this on the stakes to put this kind of thing on. I'm guessing some people will be all over it. They'll go, I've been waiting for this. I was so tired of the violin, right? I had a friend who wanted to play a French horn solo in sacrament meeting once when I was younger. They wouldn't let him. It was an instrument of the devil, right? The French horn. So they were all over that. Now, the last thing that they're saying is a faith walk. You may remember that I reported on this a while ago, where they put headphones on the kids and they walk them through a nature path where they have giant videos set up of scenes from Mormonism and Christ's life. And they have messages in your earphones and church music. Yeah, it literally sounds like it sounds like what it is, but they're encouraging the wards to do this too. They understand the power of music. They understand the manipulation that you can do with music, and it's a way to get this spiritual experience like that, right? You can instantly invoke these emotions, and when you tell the kids with the headphones, or you tell them what they're hearing means the church is true, they're going to believe it. You can get the same spiritual experience by watching an incredible movie and hearing a cinematic score, right? But this is all about that. And then it just, tells everybody to get everybody involved. And they want these things happening now, right now. And I think the reason they want them happening now is because, like I said, this huge amount of youth right now, they are really trying to do something to engage everyone, get them out on that mission, keep them engaged, and further down the line, marriage and children. So my soapbox on Christian music. And again, I have people all the time saying it wasn't that way. It was that way. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, it sounds like trying to create elevation emotion in people, so that they feel connected to the system and they stay.
Yep. That's it exactly. And I think I have one more slide. Oh, yes, our wonderful Christopher Blythe. He was all over it. He thought it was super exciting. There's a little blurb here where he says, the church's encouragement for wards and stakes to start hosting praise and worship services for youth is awesome. In fairness, they are calling them Christ-centered music devotionals that will be held in the chapel, not on a Sunday, and music concerts that will be held outside of the chapel. Somewhere, somebody is complaining about how it's too evangelical. Well, yeah, it is pretty evangelical, but our whole deal is that we take the good from everything and everyone. I'm so excited. We had our own youth albums. He talks about those kind of youth albums. And we start praising Christ with all the emotions and all the tools he's given us. So he agrees it's praising, because the LDS church does not worship Christ and they don't praise Christ. They don't know how to do that. They're trying to do that. But again, we have these quotes like Bruce R. McConkie. We worship the Father and him only and no one else. We do not worship the Son. We do not praise Christ. We do not praise Jesus. Another reason people think we are not Christian, and we do not worship the Holy Ghost. But we're doing it now through music, right? Like this. Get your praise on, everybody.
I thought the Afterglow CDs were scandalous.
Exactly.
So contrary to Mormon music.
You couldn't take those on your mission, could you? And just like the lady that confessed to me that she listened to Caleb, right? And she felt horrible about it. She goes, I know it's probably an evangelical satanic message, but the music just makes me feel really happy, and I'm like, you do you. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, I thought I would add a slide in that just really quickly just showed with the John DeLynn Mormon Stories lawsuit with the church, all the coverage it's gotten. When you guys were on with me last week on the newscast, I had made a mention that there was going to be a major newspaper that covered this story. You guys said who? And I said, I'm not saying a word. I'm not giving the church any sort of jump up on that. It was the Washington Post. I did get mentioned in that as they asked me my thoughts and feelings on the Mormon Stories lawsuit. But since then, the Chicago Sun-Times, the EastIdahoNews.com, Salt Lake Tribune, of course, The Guardian, and there were others as well. But I thought I would put these ones up and just let folks know that this story was getting a ton of coverage. And so it is out there. That is happening. And I think the more exposure this gets, the better it works in favor of John, because the one thing the church doesn't want to do is deal with a bunch of negative publicity. And they had to have seen that doing this was going to cause just that. So
it's everywhere. I've seen it everywhere. And did you see what John posted earlier this afternoon? It was a comment that somebody made that said, you are so sweet. I came across a story on Facebook about the LDS Church suing Mormon Stories podcast. I then binge watched many of the LDS discussions episode. I'm out, baby. This church is so fake. Barbara Streisand effect, right? That's what it is right there.
Yeah. You start off believing the church has sued Mormon Stories. Now it's in the news. Next thing you know, you're listening to Mormon Stories, and now you realize the church isn't what it claims to be. So interesting. We're at the end. We've covered it. It is 7:31. We're on the backside here. We'll just talk a little bit about some of the things we've got going on. I'll mention one more time the cruise. Yeah. It is fast approaching. We're just a couple of months away here. So 3 months away. So September 13th, we will embark from Long Beach near Los Angeles, California. We'll be at sea on day 2, then Cabo San Lucas, Mazatlan, Puerto Vallarta, and then we've got a couple of fun days at sea, and then back to Los Angeles we go. If you look down below, you'll see all the Mormon influencers that are coming on the trip. Radio Free Mormon, Rebecca, myself, Landon Brophy, Dr. Charlie Harrell, Jana Spangler, Ganesh Cherian, Dr. Julie De Azevedo, Dr. Randall Bell, Dr. John Lundwall, and Sam Young. So what a great lineup, folks. I hope that if you're available and you can go on the cruise, you can go to khexethtravel.com/post-mormon-celebration-cruise. If you want to find more information, you can go to mormondiscussions.org or mormondiscussionpodcast.org. And in the menu at the top, it'll say Post-Mormon Celebration Cruise. Click that. You'll find tons more information. Register today. We can't wait to see you. It's going to be a fun time. So there is that. And then, Rebecca, you've got so much going on this week. I was really excited to see so many things in the slideshow with Mormonish.
Yeah. And I will say that's a lot of doctors that you listed out there. So, not doctors, but a lot of smart people, right? We're going to have a lot of interesting conversations.
There are no bad dentists here.
No, nobody's going to try to give you a physical on the ship unless you want it, I guess. So, and I did see that somebody was eaten by a crocodile in Puerto Vallarta, but I hope that that's kind of like a one-off. So besides, we'll be on the ship. So yikes. Anyway, yes, what is going on with Mormonish this week? Let me move forward here. Last Thursday, I already put this out. I'm doing that series with Patrick on Book of Mormon authorship. We're kind of exploring, kind of like you and RFM did, Bill, the Sidney Rigdon angle and some different things like that. We're basically working through the word print studies, which are pretty interesting. And Patrick does a good job of making them simple to understand. It's fascinating information. That's already out, short episode, like an hour. Then our regular Tuesday episode, which is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Again, sole author. Since I've been hitting Sidney Rigdon so hard, others have come forward and say, I want to talk about sole author. I'm like, you know what? I'm here for anybody that wants to put anything out there and read it onto the record. So we have got Ganesh, based on his amazing book. Of course, if you guys haven't gotten this yet, please go do. Was Joseph Smith the sole author of the Book of Mormon? We're going to dive into that. Really, really interesting textual comparisons between different chapters in the Book of Mormon and the D&C. It's kind of some mind-blowing stuff. So you're going to want to tune in tomorrow night. And then, as I said on Thursday, I am re-releasing this episode from about a year and a half ago when I was in the throes of dealing with the whole thing with the Nauvoo Visitor Center. Not a lot of people caught this or cared about it because what's the Nauvoo Visitor Center? It's been announced. It's been dedicated. You guys are going to want to watch this. Like I said, we play tape from the city council meeting where the lawyer does what those lawyers do, and those council members, even some of them LDS, just go, I guess I don't have a choice. It's really actually heartbreaking to watch. So that's going to be on Thursday at some point when we release that. And that is what Mormonish has going on this week.
Excellent. So Mormonism Live, Wednesday, 6 p.m. We've been talking a lot about the William Clayton journals that Jeremy Hoop procured and then released. And we had an episode last Wednesday going into depth on those. When that episode was over, we reached out to Jeremy and said, we'd love to have you on, give you a chance to share your side, answer some of the questions that the audience has. So Joseph Smith's polygamy with our guest, Jeremy Hoop, Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then Thursday morning, the next episode in a logical deconstruction of Mormonism, we're juxtaposing the 1886 revelation by John Taylor that polygamy can never end versus the 1890 manifesto, which initiated the ending of polygamy. What side are you on, Jesus? Make up your mind and stick to it. So that'll be our conversation on Thursday morning. And then I'll just note Friday, Radio Free Mormon doing Mormonism After Dark at 8 p.m. I should have put the new thumbnail up. He's got a new one he's using for that. But Friday, 8 p.m., please join Radio Free Mormon at Mormonism After Dark, where all the cool cats hang out. There's that. And then I don't know what he's got prepared, but normally RFM puts out an episode on Saturday nights at 7 p.m. So be on the lookout for that as well. All right. What do you want to say about the 4th of July, Rebecca?
Well, I think we better wish everybody from the Mormon Newscast a happy 4th of July, because that is coming up on Saturday, isn't it? It's on Saturday this year. I don't love that because you don't necessarily get that day off work that you could usually kind of extend the weekend, not this weekend. But anyway, I hope everybody has a lot of fun. Do you have fun plans, Bill? Are you down in the forest fire area?
I'm close to some of that. It's up in Beaver, and there's been a few fires that have broke out there. I know that 3 firefighters lost their lives this week at the Utah-Colorado border, and really sorry to hear that. So our thoughts go out to their loved ones and their family. By the way, I think we look really good in patriotic outfits. So that's a really great image, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think we do too. And no, everybody be careful. I had plans to go to Colorado over 4th of July and had to cancel those because everywhere I was going to go is now on lockdown, no 4th of July activities, and there's fires. So I think I may have to go back to Idaho. That going north is about the only place from Utah where you're not going to get hit by some kind of fire. So everybody stay safe out there, but have this is a big one, 250. Have a great 4th of July, everybody from the Mormon Newscast.
Yeah, folks, please hit like and subscribe. We're so glad that you joined us. We hope that you got information. You got the chance to be informed on all things Mormonism, and we appreciate each of you here. Please do go to the various links that I put in the chat right now if you're watching. Also down below in the YouTube description, it is the donor box donation links for both Mormonish and Mormon Discussion for me and for Radio Free Mormon. Please do donate, and then we'll just see you back here next Monday, 6 p.m. after all the other things we put out for another episode of the Mormon Newscast. Good night, everybody.
Good night. night.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.